Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Digital Adoption Show. Today, we are tackling a hot topic that's been making waves in the learning and development space: skill-based learning, the key to elevating your L&D strategy. I'm your host, Navya Agarwal, Digital Adoption Consultant at Whatfix. In today's episode, we are diving into skill-based learning and how it can elevate your learning and development strategy. We'll explore why it's gaining traction and how it can be the key to staying ahead in today's fast evolving work environment. Joining me is an incredible lineup of L&D experts who are here to share their wisdom and actionable insights. Our first guest on the episode is Emma Adderley. Emma is the Recognition and Performance Manager at Lloyds Banking Group, with extensive experience in transforming workplace culture, recognition, change, and performance. She is passionate about helping individuals unlock their potential and fostering a culture where people can thrive and achieve a true sense of purpose. Joining her, our second guest on the show today is Giorgia Gamba, an award-winning L&D consultant with over 15 years of experience in crafting innovative learning programs. She specializes in equality, diversity, and inclusion management and leadership. She is dedicated to creating impactful digital blended and face-to-face learning experience that drive positive organizational change. Georgia and Emma, welcome to the show. We are thrilled to have you share your insights. So, before everything else, why don't you go ahead and share your journey with our audience today? Georgia, let's start with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. So I've been working in learning and development for about 15 years or so for different kinds of organizations. I worked for a political party as the training manager, and I worked for about 10 years for CIPD, so the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, on creating learning content and particularly on moving their offering from mostly face-to-face to mostly digital with a variety of things in between. And in the last few months, I've worked for myself and also very recently joined Christian Aid as their global learning and talent partner. So I've had also volunteer for other NGOs and voluntary organizations. So quite a variety of sectors and different kind of audiences and experiences. And I'm looking forward to share some of what I've seen and done with you.
Awesome. What about you, Emma?
So thank you so much for having me. So I'm Emma. I have been in the space of L&D change and transformation for around 8 years. Not a traditional route into L&D. I started off in sales and then was an account manager, a finance advisor, and then found my way into my passion, which is learning and development. I joined Legal and General about 6 years ago, and I'd moved just into Lloyds Banking Group recently as of March this year. When I was at L&G, I was looking at like people development and culture change. So how do we create the right environments to let people flourish in their career? And how do we change the culture that allows that to happen? And within Lloyds Banking Group, I actually look at transforming our recognition for across the group. So I've come in to transform that as a tool to help change the culture.
Perfect. I think with your extensive experience in the field, I am really excited to see how this session will unfold. I'm confident that we'll unlock several valuable takeaways for our audience today. So let's jump into our main discussion. Today, we have 3 questions about skill-based learning in learning and development, and we'll aim to pack as much insight as possible into these questions. Are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Yes?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So let's kick off with the first crucial question. What key factors do you consider when assessing if an organization is ready to implement a skill-based learning approach? And if they're not quite there yet, what practical steps can L&D teams take to help them successfully transition and embrace this method? So, Emma, let's start with you.
Thanks. So yeah, I think that it's quite a big question. And I think there's 4 topics that I would actually cover with an organization that's wanting to shift into this space. And they can be quite blunt questions, but hopefully they're quite useful to ask yourself and be true around, do you value as a business continuous learning and development? So how mature is the business in this? And when I say L&D, I don't just mean your traditional training. I mean that continuous learning, that learning in the moment, Is the CEO behind that? Is everyone behind actually moving into this space where continuous learning is a part? The second one would be leadership maturity. This can be quite a big question to ask. Is your leadership in a space and mature enough to move into this space? And what I mean by this is, are leadership still in the position where they feel if a resource within their team was going to develop and get more skills and move into other areas of the business, would they help that to happen? Or would they be more concerned about the resource of the team and the present of what the work actually involves now? And that's a hard one because that's how we've been taught. A resource has been your resource. Actually, how do you open up that behavior and allow to give them opportunities go across the business and build them skills? Do you know what skills that you need in your business and where the gaps are? So actually having that analysis of the skills and that make up your business, then where are the gaps? And then how does this actually compare to industry as well? And do you have the technology to allow this to evolve as well? So do you have the right technology in place that can help you analyze them gaps, that can help them opportunities come up and have that kind of one single source of truth around the skills that make up your business and the gaps? So they would be the questions that I would go to first with any business that's wanting to evolve in this space. And then the steps to transition, as I said before, around, say, if we think about leadership and the CEOs, etc., have we educated enough in the space of what it could lead to? So if we shift into a skills-based organization, what could that lead to? What could that open up for the business? How could it increase performance? How can it increase retention? And actually, how can it help your business reach its objectives quickly? And I think a lot of that is about shining a light on them opportunities and really educating our stakeholders to see what this could bring. If I was going to start it, I would start very much smaller and grow bigger. So very much in that pilot programs, go into we call it the bright sparks of the business. I think it's Simon Sinek who says the bright sparks, but again, going where the energy is and try something there to prove the concept, to show how it can actually come to life. Then also just the tools and support that employees need in the moment whilst they're going through this transition, I think is super important, having that support available to help them through that thinking as well.
Awesome. I think that was an incredible insight. Georgia, I would love to hear your take on this as well.
Yes, I agree with Emma in terms of it is a big question and it could be a long answer, but I'll be as brief as possible. So I think in terms of readiness, I would start with the why. So I would want to have a conversation with the business leaders about why do we want to make this transition? Why do we want to shape our organization as a skills-based organizations? What do we want to achieve and how this would enable us to do that? And why is it different than what we have now? So what's the journey that we need to embark on? And then I would move to the how in terms of like, how would we want to do this? And probably in terms of the what. So what do we mean by skill-based? Skills is such a broad term. And I know that a lot of people are talking about skills-based learning and skills-based organization at the moment. I'm not 100% convinced that when you say that everybody has the same image in their head, I think that looks different for different people. And I'm not saying that is wrong. It's probably very right, because it should probably look different depending on your context and the organization you operate in. But at least within the organization, there needs to be agreement on what we mean by skills and what we mean by skills-based organization and what we mean by skills-based learning, so that we know that we're all speaking the same language and that we're all talking about the same thing, and that we all agree that we're doing it for specific reasons that will benefit that environment and that business and our people within that business. So I think I would start from there, and then I would look at the timing. How urgent is this transformation and the benefits that it will take? When do we want to see these benefits and how would we measure the success? So that would be the things I would consider initially. If an organization is not quite ready, which steps? It's basically kind of the same steps. I would definitely always start from the why, also mentioning Simon Sinek to start with the why, so that we're all very clear, we're purpose driven, we're working and moving into the same direction. We know why we're going there. We want to go there. We're all on board, especially the leadership and the people who need to drive it. And then we can kind of work out how we're going to do it, how we're going to get there, when we're going to get there, and also how we know we are there because we have measures of success in place.
I think it was fantastic insight. I love how you have broken down the process for organization at different stages of readiness. So, now building on that, what are the most effective strategies for implementing a skill based learning approach? And how do you overcome the challenges of scaling this strategy across larger enterprises? So, let's start with you, Georgia, this time.
Yes, I think it does really depend on the context and the kind of organization and the scale of it and the sector partially. But first of all, I would go back to what I was saying earlier. It's in terms of steps, I think definition is key. So what do we mean by skills in this organization and how do we know if we have them or if we don't have them? How we define them, how we assess if we have them and how we assess the gaps. So I would also start from piloting and small trials. Think big, but start small. You want to have that big picture. You want to have that sort of direction of travel for the whole organization. But you want to probably start prioritize an area of an organization. It might be a department, it might be a team, there might be just a few people, depending on how you set up. But yeah, I would trial it and see how it works and what doesn't. And then use that to kind of not just expand the pilot to everybody else or the next department, the next team, but also adjust it as you go and have sort of an audit of this works really well and it's replicable across the organization and this worked really well, but it's also quite specific to maybe this team or this department and it can work for others, but it might need several adjustments or small adjustments or it might need some changes. Particularly across very big organizations, sometimes you have subcultures. So you can see that something that works really well in an area might not work if exactly replicated. So you want to adjust it when you replicate it across other parts of the organization.
Awesome. Emma, I would love to hear your thought as well.
Yeah, sure. I think George has explained it really beautifully there. So instead of repeating some of the stuff that George said, I'll share an experience that I've had, which might bring some of it to life. So when I was at L&G, we identified skills gaps across our business and very much mapped this against where we wanted our business to go and its business objectives and ambitions. And then also against the industry. So what will we see in the trends in the industry and from the skills that we needed? And one of them skills that came up was, as we all know, data literacy. And what we found by looking at our insights, looking at performance data, looking at patterns of behavior when it came to data, we found that the literacy was just a very big focus. So what we thought is, well, how do we take a subject that people maybe tend to not be super drawn to with the language, but we know they need it? How do we get people excited about these topics? And so what we did is we actually started to draw attention to the brilliant work that people were doing in the business. And we started off this series called Get Curious. And it started off with about 30 people attending. And it ended up scaling up to about 600 people attending within 12 months of each talk that we did, bringing in professionals around the topic. We used technology to allow in the moment learning so that if people wanted to go and find an answer to a question that they had a community. And we used a company called Hive Learning for that. And we built all the content, built the community so people could just go and engage with bits of content that was finding it really difficult and making it really easy to digest. So I think sometimes it's about how do you make the complex simple? How do you meet the audience where they need to be? To help build them skills, and how do you make it accessible? Well, have something called gigs, which is where somebody has a job within a project that they want to advertise. Whoever they are within the business can apply to be a part of that project and strengthen them skill. So again, it's about how do you create that transparency, that opportunity in order for people to put themselves forward for them skills as well. So I think as well, we need to think about the tech suite. Now, at the moment, a lot of companies are using a lot of different technology for different things within the company. So today, you're using Microsoft, Viva, you're using Engage. Even if I think about now, the recognition system, recognition now and the building of AI, You could actually use that to give skills profiling on people and what they're getting recognized for and where they're getting the most kind of focused and on different skills. But actually, if I start using recognition skills based as one source of truth, somebody else is using Workday as one source of truth, somebody else is using Microsoft. They all need to connect and talk to each other. Otherwise, we're going to get different sources of truth at any one time on what makes up the skills within the business.
If I could pick up on a couple of things that Emma said, because she said about accessing skills and skills training in the flow of work. And I think this is always important to be able to access learning as part of your work rather than as something separate. But I think it's even more important when we talk about skills, because skills really needs to be practiced, and there's probably less use when you want to learn a skill to kind of go off somewhere else to learn it and then come back to work and maybe not have to use it for quite some time. And by the time you do need to practice it or use it, you kind of forgot what you were supposed to do. So I thought that was a great point that I just wanted to build on.
Awesome. I think that was super, super enlightening. And I really appreciate how you both highlighted effective strategies, addressed the challenges of scaling skill-based learning, especially when it comes to larger enterprises. Now, with that in mind, I have one final question for you today, which is how do you effectively measure the success and impact of skill-based learning initiatives? And if you can probably cite some examples of metrics or outcomes that shows its impact. So, Giorgia, why don't you kick off with an anecdote?
Yes, I think impact is so important. So as we know in learning, we can measure so much about the actual intervention. We can measure how many people went to, if we're talking about a course particularly, we can measure how many people were there, if they had a great time, how nice were the biscuits if it was face-to-face. And all of that. But those things can also have value, I would like to say. That sometimes we do need to measure that as well, but it doesn't really give us an idea of the impact. So I personally like to bring back the measurement of the impact into the world of work and what you do as part of your job. So for example, in a management program, in several actually that I worked on, when we came to plan the measures and the impacts, we really want to see it happening in the real work. So if we're trying to upskill managers, for example, in having, one-to-one conversations with the members of staff, that what we really want to look at is the before and after. So before our interventions or before having change our training from maybe more knowledge-based to more skills-based, then how are they doing it? Not just how often, but how well and how much staff member sort of valued that and got something out of it, and how it was happening afterwards. And I think it's very important to have a baseline. So, if you can have a 360, that's obviously kind of in this specific example, that's quite a good gold standard, because then you can ask all the people involved and touched right there. So you can ask the manager's manager and you can ask the team members how these things happen, what did they get out of it, if they get support in different areas, for example, in career development and in workload assessment and all those different areas. And then you can be very specific if you want to measure a particular skill. Sometimes it's not always possible. Let's say you want to measure how a person deals with difficult conversation. You hope that they're not going to have to apply that very often and all the time or immediately after they kind of learned more about it. So it's not, an exact science in that respect. But I think, if it's part of how you already assess their job and what they do and you can measure how they've improved, then is a very effective measurement of impact.
Amazing. I think that was a great answer. Emma, I would love to hear your approach on this as well.
Yeah, and I think Georgia's quite right there. I think there isn't always that science. I think you definitely have the tool there in your toolkit to access, to draw out some of the data. I suppose one thing I was reflecting on when Georgia was talking was a little bit about, in my world at the moment, within recognition, I look at some surveys sometimes, and a recent Gallup survey showed that people who are happy employees within a company, and that company is 20% more profitable than those who score lower in a happiness scale. So when I'm thinking about behavior, actually, by allowing somebody to excel within the skills that they want to build, allowing that kind of movement within a company as well, and being used for the gate a different kind of experience for that person, right? So they're going to feel that they're useful. They're going to feel that they're building their skills. They've got more autonomy. They're trusted. So the behaviors that we might see could be brilliant for and impact that performance. So yeah, looking at just to echo Georgia, looking at pulse surveys, looking at behavior changes throughout an experiment. You know, if you were going to experiment with a pilot, doing behavior benchmarking before the experiment starts, 6 weeks in, a further 6 weeks, a further 6 weeks. So you having that constant touch point and looking at what are the changes within how they feel and their actual ability as well, improving. So I think that would be a really powerful story to tell after you've experimented with this.
I can just build on that because it's such a great point, and it kind of brings really to life the fact that also you can't just assess sometimes the skill in isolation. So if you don't create the environment for that person to then, or those people to then apply the skill and just give them really the opportunity to grow and to flourish in that environment. And like Emma said, you know, to be happy because they're trusted and because, you know, they're given opportunities, they can access maybe promotion, or it's dependent on the environment, but they feel valued. So I think they will definitely apply the skills in a more effective way, because everything that goes around it in their team and the environment they work on supports that and encourages that, rather than being maybe very sort of more of a punish culture, or more of a culture where there's not enough trust or not enough freedom for people to, or psychological safety for people to suggest new ideas and new approaches. And then you kind of stifle their creativity and their ability, even if they have the skill. So it's important, I guess, to look at skills based as part of a broader environment that nurture that training, like Emma said at the beginning, nurture that learning of a culture of learning and constant learning and development.
Awesome. I think those were some really great insights. And your examples of measuring success in skill-based learning initiatives is something that definitely our audience would resonate today. And before we wrap up, Emma and Georgia, what parting advice would you give to our listeners who are looking to bring in skill-based learning in their overarching learning strategies?
I think I would probably advise to think while you're doing it, have a big picture in mind, but start small with small trials and pilots.
I love that. I would echo that. Definitely. I love a good pilot and experiment. My bit of advice would be to think about, and Georgia summed up what I said really nicely and added a really nice build to it, but think about the environment as being actually the probably the key factor to make this work. So if the environment isn't right, then we need to start there. But if you really want to give this opportunity, create that environment where people can be safe, people can come up with ideas and can put their hand up to build their skills, that's what we need. We need a really safe environment for people to flourish, and then you're onto a winner.
Perfect. I think we have had some really incredible stories and great insights today. A massive shout out to Georgia and Emma for sharing their journey and expertise with us. So remember, skill-based learning is shaping the future of L&D, empowering us to build a workforce that's just not prepared but unstoppable. So stay tuned for more inspiring stories on the Digital Adoption Show, your go-to podcast for all things learning and transformation, streaming on your perfect platforms. And yes, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep this learning adventure rolling. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Emma. It was a pleasure hosting you both.
Thank you, Marabina.
Thank you.